Hello, and welcome to my first episode, my first real episode of Let's Troll Twitter. I've actually done this a little bit before, a lot on my own, but probably a couple little video clips too. But anyway, all you have to do is open your browser in private browser mode, preferably with Privacy Badger running. Um, you can get this from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It's a little web plugin that blocks tracking cookies. So you can see right here, Twitter's already tried to push 2 tracking cookies, which will track you across various websites and create like an identifiable profile about you and your browsing habits. Excuse me. So Privacy Badger will help protect you against that. I'd recommend searching through some website articles and stuff on adjusting your browser settings to help reduce tracking and whatnot. I wouldn't say that like even Tor and stuff like that. I mean, there's benefits to a system like that, right? There's always trade-offs, but none of these systems are perfect. We can only do whatever. But anyway, by logging in, by using Privacy Badger and opening an incognito or private mode tab, then you are severely reducing their what's available to them, and then make sure you close out all of your private tabs when you're done with that session, because if you leave them open, that kind of creates like a temporary profile that remains until all those tabs are closed. But anyway, that being said, you just go to twitter.com/explore, and you probably know better than I do about all this stuff. This is what I do now. I mean, they've obviously like banned me so many times from this platform, and I didn't even care about it to begin with. LinkedIn banned me. I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go to Twitter. Everybody's a little more chatty over there anyway. It's like less boring. But then Twitter banned me for not being hardcore. I don't even like to say left because I used to be part of the left, or what I considered left wing thinking or something. And just everything that's happened over the last 360 and a half days has just been like, made me think I've just totally back ever since the Greta Thunberg thing. Like once I saw her, I was like, I just started reeling in my line, going, okay, maybe I'm done. I'm done with this lake. Like this ain't for me, because it's like it was obvious she was a total globalist puppet. Of like, okay, we're gonna get this girl, this little girl that nobody can say anything bad about, and like, what is that? Is that the opposite of a straw man? I don't know. I'm not in intellectual mode right now. But yeah, so they get her and they're like, it's probably obvious to anybody who's still listening to this, who would listen to my viewpoints, that they prop her up and pretend like she's going to the UN. Like I just picture the Wizard of Oz, like she even looks like Dorothy, like in the second Wizard of Oz. Now that I think about it, she's like Return to Oz. She looks just like that little girl in Return to Oz. So take the girl from Return to Oz and put her in the first Wizard of Oz at the Emerald Palace, and that's like how I envision Greta Thunberg walking up to that door of like, listen, UN, you're gonna do what I say, and it's just like, wow, really? And then I watched all these like what I would call full-grown adults just totally fall for it, on Twitter and all those social networks, and they're like, yeah, we need to get behind this girl and da da da, and who are you to say what a 16-year-old little girl could say or do? She might have been younger when, I don't know, I think she was 16 at the time. She looks younger to me than that, but. So anyway, you're not allowed to contest what she says because she says she wants the world to be a better, greener place, and her childhood was robbed, and you know what? I was raised with those. I felt the same way at 16. I I really did. I first got into like looking up what anarchy was, and not just in the chaos and out of control sense, but I started studying like anarchism and stuff like that, and I guess you could say anti-establishment. I didn't really identify specifically with anything, but I was definitely looking at the established establishment and questioning things at that age. I think a lot of people do, or not necessarily everybody, but I think a lot of people do. And I realized, hey, we're as a worldwide society or even just a nation or whatever, we're doing a lot of things wrong, right? There's a lot of, and I still feel that way to this day, you know? I still look at all the gasoline cars driving by and think a lot of the same lefty stuff about him, you know? I don't own a car. I don't drive a car. I use public transportation like whenever it really makes sense to, but if I can walk somewhere by any stretch of the imagination, I'll walk there or ride a bike there or whatever. Like, so it's just, I don't know. And then you see all these people, like, right when that COVID thing hit, they're all like, I consider it like virtue signaling, where they all stay indoors and agree to the lockdown and stuff. And I know a lot of people saw it coming because this is a whole thing where, you know, like, people knew this was coming, period. End of story. It was so obvious. And, that just tells you right there, you know, when you start seeing people go into this like hunker down mode, like even right before COVID hit, like they knew it was coming. So anyway, yeah, Book of Revelation, all that stuff. Like it's basically there's the people who read Revelation and know what's up, and then there's the people who are part of that system that is imposing those negativities on all of us, you know, that are creating that satanic world for us. And they're part of all their little clubs and just doing their little piece, just turning their little cog and stuff. And, you know, it doesn't really seem like they're that bad of a person to themselves. And I'm not trying to judge anybody, but I'm just saying, hey, we all are cogs in some part of the system. So if you know if your cog's turning for, you know, none of us are turning perfectly, right? But you know, without even going too deep down inside, if you're working for the quote unquote man, the Satan man, you know if you're working for that man or for the guy upstairs, the guys upstairs, however you want to think about that. And that to me is a big deal. You know, I think deep down inside it is for everybody. Like we're all looking for some sort of what you might call quote unquote spiritual type of I don't want to say glorification, satisfaction, something in between like glorification and satisfaction. I can't think of the right term right now, but something to fulfill that. You know, whether it's somebody who thinks that this is the one life we get, you know, and they got to get everything they can while they can, so that when they're laying there on their proverbial deathbed, they can fold their hands and say, "Well, yeah, this was a good life. Got laid a bunch, made a bunch of money, had a ton of children, and now I could just close my eyes and take my last breath, just like all those good Hollywood movies that I watched throughout that lifetime." And for 99% of us, that's not the way the world is. Our little world's gonna end at all. So whatever. I don't mean to like chuckle too hard on that. It's not really hilarious, but it all goes down the drain in the end. We can look at it however we want, but obviously this life has a purpose, and if nothing else, it's just to get through it, no matter what you think, right? So right here on the screen in front of me, I have Tennessee Mayor Lonnie Norman has died of COVID-19 after being hospitalized. And then I guess they decided to cut out the last part where it says that nobody is surprised. I'm not trying to mock this guy or anything, you know, this gentleman. I'm mocking Twitter's mockery of this life that we're trying to get through. And this was the first thing when I went to twitter.com/explore anonymously. And this is for me. And this is the thing that's popped up. If you go there right now, you know, there's a chance that a few other things could pop up on you, but this should be one of them. And the first thing I noticed was that Tennessee mayor, and it's not a governor. So it's not Tennessee governor has died of COVID-19, which would, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean anything if he was or wasn't, but that's almost like what they're trying to push, like that initial vibe. I feel like why don't they pit, you know, Tennessee, Charlesville, Tennessee mayor dies, of COVID or something like that, like, and I just made that town up or whatever, but he's probably the mayor of a little town in Tennessee. Maybe it's a big city, I don't know. But mayors are mayors of cities. Governors are governors of states. So, there's probably 100 mayors in Tennessee, I would imagine, or somewhere plus or minus a figure like that. There's a lot of mayors, right? So of course they're going to blow this out of proportion, and then it's after being hospitalized. So we've already seen with a lot of people, even the gentleman that was at Trump's rally that most likely died of terminal cancer. I'm not saying whether or not he did have COVID or whether or not that was a serious factor, but the man he was terminally ill with cancer and he died, and they pushed it as a pure COVID death. That's what they pushed it as. And what's this guy's story? Like, what's really going on here with him? Did he not have any comorbidities? Because the typical death of COVID has 2.5 comorbidities. That means they have 2 other significant factors or more in their death, most likely. And most people are over the vast majority of people are over the age of 65, So even if you look at the numbers, it's just like, what percentage of the population is even over 65? Because it starts thinning out. It always has thinned out over, once you're a survivor. If you're over 65 and you're still alive, you are a survivor. I mean, I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's the truth. Like, people just start dropping like flies at that age. They'd start dying. People die at all ages, obviously, but 65, and the older I get, the more I realize, like, I always thought, like, oh, I'll hit 60s with a running start, no big deal. And now I'm like, wow, will I even be around to see 60? Like, so according to the city of Manchester, Tennessee, Mayor Lonnie Norman passed away on Monday morning after being hospitalized at the beginning of the month for COVID-19. So right now, this is how far we are into the month. So he's been in there for a little over 10 days, I guess. Via the New York Post, heartbreaking news. Mayor of Manchester, Tennessee, apparently has died of COVID-19. Breaking news. Of course, they're all going to push it, And who knows? Maybe he really did. Maybe that was a singular factor. Like, I would believe that's possible, But I know that a lot of these numbers have been fudged and stuff, so I'm going to search out on this one, see what's going on here, if I can find anything. Lonnie Norman. Dies of coronavirus, dies after valiant fight. Of course, nothing's going to be questioning it, right? They're just like, hey, run it up the flagpole. So I feel like that's Twitter. I don't think anybody's surprised about it. Like, excuse me, that they're just going to milk it. They're going to put that front and center. And would they even have it if he didn't? If it wasn't supposedly COVID? But meanwhile, Trump holds rally in Florida as White House says he tested negative for COVID-19. And did they say anything hardly about, they called it a peaceful protest on law and order that they claimed happened at the White House, and it was really Blexit, Blexit, which is obviously a pun on Brexit, and that is the 25 to 30% of so-called Black America leaving the Democratic Party to vote red because they're tired of the BS. They're tired of being used like pawns. And that's exactly what's happened. If you go back in history, the Democrat Party is totally what has oppressed black people. I mean, across the freaking board, 100% is the Republicans. I mean, and I'm not a Republican. I grew up in a semi-conservative household, and after that, I was full left until several months ago. And so I'm not like a big fan of like Republican policy or straight ticket right or anything like that whatsoever. But I'll just say, like, if anything, I was usually like under the same illusion. I feel like where it's like, oh, in 2008, 2007, 2008, I was like, thank God there was a Democratic president then, so that I could get my unemployment during the Great Recession and stuff like that. And it's like, no, I was bamboozled straight up. They created that. I blamed it on Bush, and I'm not a Bush fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I totally blamed all that on Bush. I was like, oh, Barack's, this and that. And I think Barack Obama is very articulate. Don't get me wrong. I think he's one of the most articulate presidents we've ever had, period. Um, I don't think he represents the so-called black population, though, whatsoever. And I think a lot of people who would identify as black would not, would probably agree with me on that one as well. The funny thing is that I've seen black people call Donald Trump the first black president to his face because he's done more for black people. Obviously, they're not saying he's black, but they're saying as a president, he's been the first president to truly represent the black population. Um, and if you look into it, just what he's done this year alone, it's tremendous. And, he'll brag about it because he's a politician and that's what politicians usually do and stuff like that. But it's true. If you look into it, he's done, I would say, almost an unfair amount. He's almost unfairly given black people stuff and done stuff for black people. But you know what? For a group that was oppressed, it's like, all right, I'm more for even keel for sure. I think there's a lot of white people that could use a lot of benefits, a lot of Asian people that could use a lot of benefits, a lot of Mexican people, a lot of intermixed racial people, and all sorts of stuff that could use a lot of help in a lot of areas and a lot of cleanups and stuff like that. But anyway, all that being said, Trump has done a huge amount for black people. I've dug in and I cannot find an ounce of racism. I cannot find anything racist from him. It is so ridiculous. Like, dig in on that media if you haven't done so and tell me, and then go dig in on Biden. Biden was a segregationalist. Give me a break. Like, straight up. Biden was a segregationalist. And I think he still is. I think that segregation is where the left is trying to take this country back to. And there were respectable people that were segregationalists, that like Malcolm X. And I'm not saying that like I agree with their views or that I'm not a segregationalist personally, but I look at it like, okay, it wasn't just about racism, like racism being defined as one person thinks another race is superior to a different race, and people who were serious like segregationists there were serious segregationists that weren't racist. They didn't think like, oh, black power or white power or anything like that. They just thought that races were culturally different and that this integration of races had failed and that they needed to be mostly separate. Not that they couldn't be cordial to each other or trade with each other or anything like that, but that just the fact that like that's the way Malcolm X looked at it. And that made me go back into my own family tree where I knew that there were people who were probably segregationalists way back. And I was like, wow, maybe they weren't purely racist, but I still have to assume that they probably were because of just what you see coming down the pipes, kind of thing. Like, where it's like, I don't know. I feel like there was also bad feelings towards other races, I felt that in parts of my family line, not all of it, but I saw streaks of, and there's streaks in all races like that where people were just like saying the wrong things about the right people and stuff. And that includes people's sexuality, all sorts of stuff. And it got to be the point where when I would have like dinner with those family members or whatever, I would speak out against it. That's when I first started going left. I didn't even know what left wing was or anything like that. And I just noticed that I started speaking out against all that stuff. And I was like, you know what? I remember for a minute thinking like, it'd be really interesting if I was like black and gay sitting at this table right now, Not that I wanted to be, not that I wasn't fine with who I was or anything, but I just for the sake of being able to put up that argument or be like, oh, you want to say this to my face, that kind of a thing. because it just got old and everything. So I I basically backed the car out and took off, so to speak, from those family members, and the relationship fizzled with them after that. I didn't they were no as I became an adult, they weren't people that I hung around with anymore. And that sucks because growing up, the those bad issues aside, they were otherwise good people. So I'm sorry that they wanted to continue to think like that. And I feel like that was a major reason for that disconnect there. But anyway, I'm supposed to be trolling Twitter, right? This is my rant, my stupid rant, where I just put on the headphones. I'm like, oh, I think I could talk for like maybe 5 minutes, and then I talk for like 5 days. President Trump holds rally as White House says he is tested. Huh, that's kind of a neutral sort of headline. Says he tested negative for COVID-19. President Trump returned to the campaign trail on Monday, beginning 3 week sprint to the November 3rd election with the rally in the vital battleground state of Florida. Ahead of the rally, the White House revealed that Trump tested negative for COVID-19 earlier on Monday. Democratic candidate Joe Biden called the president's decision to hold a rally reckless. Would an opposing politician ever say anything nice about the competition? Oh, actually, they would. Trump did. Trump said some nice stuff about Bernie before he lost the primaries. He said he wanted Bernie to. He was on Bernie's side, and he said that he would like to run against Bernie. He straight up said that. Look it up. President Trump returned to the campaign trail Monday in Florida, which is key battleground. Trump's most recent, same old, same old. Okay, so we've got the neutral stuff. Tells reporter in a call this morning, President was getting on my case for not having enough rallies scheduled now. That's good to hear. He'll be in Florida, Pennsylvania, Iowa, North Carolina. Pretty quick rebound. I mean, even if you say like, okay, let's say he didn't have COVID, right? Let's say, oh, he just had pneumonia or bronchitis or something. Dude's like 74 years old. Like, no matter what. I mean, even a common cold's got to knock you on your ass a little bit at 74. And you could argue he's overweight. Anybody who's 30 pounds over what they're supposed to be for their height and everything. I think he's slightly tall. So, given that, he should have a little bit of girth on him. But, yeah, so it's like, you factor in he's 74. He's like virtually a decade into the danger zone. He's 30 pounds overweight, just factors like that just make it to where, like, okay, he's got multiple blows against him if he even has just a common cold or flu or pneumonia or something. And I've had pneumonia as a young man, and I'll tell you what, like, I remember it was so intense. It was like, I could not freaking believe it. And it was like solid days of just like thinking just crazy stuff. Like, I couldn't believe that other like children could go through that and stuff. I had walking pneumonia, and I got over it on herbs because I couldn't afford hospitalization, medication, any of that kind of stuff. So I looked up herbs, and I coincidentally moved from a more desert environment to a more like sea level environment. So I tend to think that had a big factor in it too. But after that move, I had the walking pneumonia for going on like a week. Did the move, had already been taking the herbs and stuff, and was feeling better. And even the herbs I took, it was like oregano and garlic and stuff like that. And I remember reading the natural medicine books and stuff and sites online, and they were like, don't bother taking like the powdered junk in your cupboard. Go get like fresh oregano leaves, fresh oregano extract, or pure oregano extract, I should say, and like, real fresh garlic and stuff. Like, they're like, don't bother with the like powdered crap in your cupboard. And like I said, I was, poor at the time, kind of just typical lower middle class American, I feel like. And I just, I had to do what I had to do. And I had a ton of cheap, old, like dollar store powdered garlic and a big bottle of like old, cheap, probably dollar store or something, oregano. And I just started downing them just like like as much as I could possibly hold in my mouth and like chew down at like couple 2 or 3 times a day. And then I was able a few days later to go actually like get some little like crappy supplements that were just like joke supplements looking back, that were probably closer to placebo, but like, you know, an odorless garlic tablet, GNC brand at Rite Aid, because I didn't know any better about going to like a natural food store and going down their supplement aisles and stuff like that at the time. But that's the way to do it. If if you need to get herbs, definitely do try and get the good kinds for sure. Vitamin C, powdered vitamin C, pure ascorbic acid, not the sodium ascorbate. I mean, if you don't have anything and you only have some chewables and there's sodium ascorbate, that stuff could potentially help, right? I'm not saying like guaranteed anything for anything or nothing like that, but there seems to be evidence that it helps with scurvy, right? But anyway, those are the chewables are usually sodium ascorbate, and that's sort of a salt-based supplement. Then there's the pure ascorbic acid powder, and that is the stuff they put in like really tart candy. One trick I knew from back in the day when I was poor and homeless and stuff like that was that you could buy ascorbic acid, vitamin C on food stamps only if you got it out of the bulk bins. And it's these days it's rare, I think, to see it in a bulk bin, but if it was sold out of the bulk bin, it was considered, a food additive. But if you get it in the little plastic container, it's considered a quote unquote supplement, so anything that says supplement facts instead of nutritional facts, you're not allowed to buy with food stamps or whatever they call those these days. But yeah, so I would do that. That's how I would be able to get a little bit. Like when I was homeless, that was one of my natural remedies and stuff. And you have to megadose with it. You have to take like several thousand or more milligrams, which 1,000 milligrams is a gram. So you're talking about like 4 to 6 grams per dose at a time, and 2 or 3 times a day. And I've knocked full-blown flus out by going to work, or at least that's what I felt happened, right? And I would go to work one time in particular, I remember, and I was just like, oh wow, I've got a full-blown flu, I feel like. And I had to work, it was like there was no questions about it. I couldn't get the day off or nothing, which I thought that's horrible back then, that like you would have to work, it's like I didn't want to expose anybody to it or anything. And I almost felt like maybe it wasn't, I don't know how contagious it was or anything, but I didn't feel like it was something that was going around per se. Like, I'm sure there would probably have to be some bug from somewhere, but I felt like it was probably more of just my body was run down. So it's probably a combination of that and whatever bug in my system. But anyway, and I was a maintenance guy, so I wasn't like right up in people's faces and stuff like that doing that. But anyway, I just mega dosed on the vitamin C throughout the day, and by the end of the day I was like, I'm toast. I'm so toast. I'm going to wake up tomorrow like just ridiculously ill. And I woke up the next day like nothing ever happened. I just felt full of energy and everything, so that was pretty nice. But anyway, come to find out, if you take that pure ascorbic acid powder, which is the only one between that and the sodium ascorbate that you should be mega dosing on, like you probably want to leave it at a maximum of like 3,000 milligrams a day or 3 grams a day with the sodium ascorbate. But the if you want to do more than that, then do the pure ascorbic acid powder. But if you start doing it religiously, then you probably want to not do even the pure ascorbic acid powder and switch to a more natural form of vitamin C, something like rose hips, or there's all sorts of stuff. There's like stuff from exotic cherries, dehydrated cherry powder and stuff. Those taste good and a little bit more pricey and stuff as you go up the scale, but it's still affordable, much more affordable than most prescriptions. And prescription medicines are usually a joke. 99% of the time, a prescription is not something you want to put in your body, honestly. So that kind of stuff's good all around. And the problem is that we're so on that American starch, box food, carby diet that we're not getting the amount of vitamin C that we should. That tangy tartness. So And any of the fresh fruits and stuff that taste like that, like oranges obviously have a fair amount of vitamin C. Lemons have a ton. That's that sourness is that ascorbic acid, and that's what it is. That ascorbic acid right there. That's what you need. That will knock so much shit right out the back of you that's not even funny. It's nice. Okay, I guess this turned into a little rant about whatever I've ranted about so far. It's Fauci. The David Knight Show. The David Knight Show. Sometimes he's got a little bit of baloney mixed in with his stuff. I think everybody does, but for the most part, this guy is he's pretty cool. This guy, David Knight. Full show. And I think they allow people to go ahead and broadcast their stuff on like YouTube and everything, and they don't seem to go after them or have a problem with it. And the reason is it's part of the InfoWar deal, so they make all their money off of selling products. So the more that people rebroadcast this stuff, effectively, the more they're just pushing their supplements and stuff, which it's not like they overzealously run ads for supplements. They run them the same or less as any radio or podcast or anything would. So anyway, that's cool, because if you look at people like the more conservative voices like Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that, they pull their stuff from YouTube, and they don't let they zealously police anybody else putting their stuff out on YouTube as well. And so that speech gets constrained. It's behind a paywall, it's very difficult to find Rush Limbaugh stuff since the pandemic hit, unless you subscribe directly through his website, which I'm sorry, but I won't do. It was nice to hear his voice. He was one of those first voices of reason. I felt like that's when felt like I was turning red, politically speaking, because I was like, wow, here I am feeling like Donald Trump and freaking Rush Limbaugh are the only two voices out in the mainstream that I can identify with for, in March and April during those time periods. And that was just mind-blowing, because mind-blowing, totally. Anyway, what do I have over here? See what's actually trending under the trending tab. They got football. It's so weird to see like Twitter and stuff like that, especially Twitter, that's always trying to promote sports. Like, who cares? Like, you guys have totally pissed all over sports. That's what I feel like. They're just like the whole tearing down all the sports and everything. It just feels like, I don't know if it's China per se or what, but I just feel like the sports teams are totally bought out by, like, they don't even feel American owned. They don't feel like American culture anymore to me at all. And haven't ever really been the hugest sports fan. I wasn't a total non-sports guy. I played baseball and stuff, and like when I was younger, but I don't know. And nowadays it's just so freaking weird. And then you see Twitter, like, they'll try and promote the sports on their thing and like push all that and stuff, and I just feel like it's part of their virtue signaling, like, oh, here's all these sports teams that have, like, followed taking the knee and all this stuff and all that, and we control them, so here they are doing their thing, look at them and stuff. It's like somebody showing you pictures of their children when you don't want to see them, or I don't know, something weird. That's probably not a good analogy. I don't think I've not wanted. I think it's weird when people send out those holiday pictures of themselves and their family, like, posing. I've always thought those are weird. But I've always thought posing pictures are weird anyway. Nothing exciting, nothing too controversial. I don't know. I'm not even probably missing a lot of stuff because I'm just eyes glazed over looking at this stuff. Oregon election and news updates. Who cares? Who freaking cares? COVID-19, how to protect yourself. Here's the thing. We got all these like social media sites telling us how to protect ourselves, what to do. COVID, it's okay for them to tell you. Like, that's what's so freaking bizarre is like, oh, really? You can tell us, but then we can't tell each other. We can't discuss it with each other unless we're like shooting down the conservative voices. I'm actually kind of surprised that there's not more right-wing hating going on. Like, oh, here's Senator Mike Lee attends Barrett confirmation hearing days after contracting COVID-19. Days after. Okay. Here's the facts. World Health Organization. 10% infected. I can get away with this because it's October, so-called month of October of 2020, and this was put out in the first week of October. The World Health Organization says 10% of world's people may have been infected with virus. Here it is, every major news, all Associated Press, Bloomberg, USA News, CNN, they're all saying it. CNBC, everybody estimates 10% of the world's population. Infection everywhere. The infected spreading the virus. Okay, time to crunch some numbers quick like. So, world population. Oh, thanks Wikipedia, right here. Wikipedia is telling us the world population was estimated to have reached 7.8 billion as of March 2020. So, going on, what is it? March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. 7 months ago, the world population was estimated to have reached 7.8 billion. But we'll use that number, even though, so that number should only be bigger in theory. That number seems to only grow. It doesn't seem to shrink. So we're safe in saying that there's at least 7.8 billion, probably, right? And then probably 10 billion people, or 10% of the people infected. So if we open the handy dandy calculator and switch it back to a standard view, and we say, okay, so how many people... Get out of here, Twitter, we're done with you. 10% of the population, and then we need to get the COVID numbers. So let's first confirm when that was. It's 2020 10/5. So that was, we're now at the 12th currently, 10/5. That was exactly a week ago that they said that it was. Oh, so technically that was the second week of October, whatever, early October. They said did 10%, right? So we need to go back to the 5th on that day. COVID death toll. Coronavirus death toll and trends. Right here, this is a daily death toll. 1 million of, a little over 1 million people have died worldwide. This is a worldwide death toll, obviously, because in the United States, it's, they claim it's 200,000. But there's a lot, even the claimers themselves supposedly are saying that number could be 40% off. So that means even the people, a lot of the people behind those numbers are saying those numbers could be almost half inaccurate. So it could be closer to 100,000 people. And then if you really dig in, there's people that are saying that that could be 10 times or more, up to 1,600% off. So anyway, I'll let your imagination run on that. But here we go. In the United States, confirmed cases 7 million, world 33 million. These are confirmed, supposedly. So that should be people who took some kind of reliable test, I would imagine. But the thing is there's not really that great of reliability in any of the testing. I mean, at best, I think if you talk to the people who are real believers and whatever, you're looking at least a 10% inaccuracy rate. So that means 1 out of 10 of them are inaccurate, but don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for any of this. Look it up yourself. That's the beauty of individualism while we still have it. Okay, so anyway, this is the daily toll. I hate clicking through to these sites and giving them a visit. That says of October 13th. So that number's a little skewed from the date when they claim that, that 10% may be infected, because now they could be saying, oh, 11% are being infected, and that's what this rate's based on. Okay, here we go. So October 5th, here's the number from October 5th when they said that. You know what? I'll go ahead and do this one. I'll say, hey, let's say if they said 10% of the world, even though they were talking about it in the past, supposedly, right? But let's say, hey, at that time, 10% was infected. Just whatever, may have been infected. So we come up here and go, okay, let's go a full week later. Copy those numbers. Paste them in here. So there we go. That many people. And then if we're doing like a percentage, the way we do that is we write that. Sorry, my handwriting is about to get really sloppy. Is it my mouse writing? So if we want to do a percentage, we'd say like at 1 out of 100. 1 out of 100, that would be 1%, because that equals 0.01 or 0.01, right? Really bad. And so that equals 1%. Because a percentage is how many parts per cent. If you dissect that word, it's per, like if you think of like centimeter, centipede, cent means 100. So per 100, this is 1 per 100. So right here, if you remember your decimal math stuff, this is the tenths column. So that will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then this would become a 1, and that would reset to 0. So, but then if you come all the way over here, this would be the hundreds column, right? The hundredths column. So it would be 99 and then 1.00. And that's what 100% is, because if you go to 100%, it's 100 over 100 equals 1.00, right? Anything over the same amount is equal to 1. That's something we learned in probably 4th grade. And that equals 100%. And then the last little trick I'll show is that if you want to know how much is 64% of something, right? So it's one of the tricks, just like how we can just say 1 over 100 or 1 out of 100, and then we draw it out like this, 1 out of 100, and that's how we can figure out how to construct that little equation. We can do the same thing and say, like, if we want to say how much is 64% of something, well, we know if we slide the decimal place over 2 places, 64%, here, I'll clear this out, Control A, delete. Okay, so we know they took away my tool. That if we to write a percentage out like 99%, this is bad. I just need to do this typing tool instead. So 99% looks like this. Looks like 0.99. That's one way to write it, right? And also another way to write it going backwards in that direction would be 99 over 100. Okay. So that's all equal to the same. That's three different ways to represent the same exact value, 99%. So if we want to know what 64% is, 64% is the same as 0.64, which is the same as 64 over 100. Simple stuff, right? I mean, it's just, that's the way it is for every single percentage. So the way you figure out what is 64% of something is you just divide it. So if you have 64 out of 100, coincidentally, that will of course equal 64%, right? But the way to figure it out is to say it out loud and go, what is 64%? But now we're going to write it in the regular math terms. So 0.64 times 100 equals, what do you think it's going to be? Because that's saying 64% of, whenever we say of, just like we said like out of with that one, this one we're saying of. So 64% of 100. 0.64 of 100 equals 64. So that's how we'd write 64%. And that is almost complicated because it's so simple. It's like, what's going on, right? But that's how you kind of explain why that decimal place is moved over like that. Because when we say 64%, we're really just saying 0.64, because that's 64 100ths, right? If we're talking in decimal. And if we're talking in decimal, we say 64 100ths because there's the 10th and the 100ths column. And if we're talking about 64 over 100, which is the same thing, that's just saying 64 out of 100, right? And then if we don't want to use any of the decimal might freak people out, or the division might freak people out, so we just say 64%. And we know that's about 2/3. 66% would be 2/3, right? Which means you have 3 blocks and you grab 2 of them, you're holding 2/3 of those blocks, right? So anyway, that's to explain what's going on here with the math, so it doesn't seem like freaky magic stuff. So we're going to take this value, and using that same logic, we're going to punch it in here. And we're going to say that number, this 101,085,151, which is still just over 1 million people, that number over the total world population, which is 7,8. So that would be 7.8 million, and we want 7.8 billion, just like that, right? So, okay, now I'll go back over here and do the little equals. So if we grab this number, copy it, there we go, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. Okay, so divided by, right, because we want to put it over, divided by, and now I'm going to paste in that figure, divided by that. So we effectively have a little over 1 million over 7.8 billion equals 1.391 e minus 4. And that e minus 4 is key, because what it's saying is this number was so unique it went off the edge of the display, so they've made it an exponential value. And so we'll write, what we need to do is we need to take that, I'll come down here, tab it over, and say 1.39, which rounds up to 4, right? And then that's got that e minus 4, so e minus 4. And what that's saying we have to do here is we have to move that decimal place over 4. We have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we need to add zeros in front of this, and we got to move this back 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right there. That's where we got to put the decimal. Now we can get rid of that decimal and get rid of this e minus 4 thing. Okay, so we're good so far. But the thing is that's just this kind of a figure, right? Well, That's not the right way to say that, is it? Am I doing this right? I always get confused when I overthink this and start doing these percentages. So then we multiply this number by 100, if I'm doing it right, times 100. Why did we multiply times 100? I don't trust that calculator like that. If I go into scientific mode, it will give me a bigger number. 1085151 divided by 78000000 equals, still giving me that. So I'm pretty sure that I'm doing that right. And if anything, this math would just make the number look smaller, but it should be. So it was there. I went 1, 2, 3, 4. So even if we brought it down, okay, so if we said, if we knocked off 3 zeros and then just call this 1085 divided by 7 million, 7.8 million. And we still get the same exact figure, no matter how far we knock that down. Son of a gun. Can't believe I'm doing the math wrong. I just have to multiply it times 100 twice to get back to where I was. Which I guess that's what I have to do. Wait, 1, 2, 3. Because this is the number for the percentages is equal to that. Like that's what the percentage comes out to. Like literally that with a percent sign. So I'm trying to think of what step am I missing here. I'm going to pause it and figure it out real quick. Okay, I just had a big duh moment. I forgot 10% of the world's population because the way it was going, it was going to be like 0. It was going to be that much percent of the people of the death rate, and I was like, whoa, that's a really small number, you know, but that is if you compared it to the whole world's population. That's what I was doing wrong. So again, we had the 1, 2, 3 number like that. I'll bring up that calculator again just so you could see it. I knew I was skipping a step in there, but it was like, what step am I skipping? Put it back on the simple calculator. So we have 1085151. This is the total deaths worldwide, confirmed cases, which as far as I know, that includes even auto accidents. You know, that's taking, even the US is the highest number in the world, or one of them, if not, and it definitely includes people who died in auto accidents that later tested positive for COVID. And one of the arguments behind that is that they don't know if the COVID caused them to crash. You know, that's what they say. So anyway, you know it's going on. It's admitted. Anybody who's looked into it has seen at least a handful of situations where that's gone down, and that's just what's bubbled to the surface. And we know there's a lot of it going down, that it's required in a lot of areas that people have to report stuff like that. Even on a federal level, that is being pushed, is that if there's, you know, any chance that that person might have died of that they are supposed to report it like that. And that also, the more they bump that to the top of the list, the more money they get for doing that. So it's really bad when you financially incentivize, you know, create a situation where the economy is really bad, that businesses get shut down and hospitals aren't allowed, you know, initially weren't allowed to do elective surgeries and stuff like that. And then you tell them, hey, here's another way to make money. Come up with a lot of COVID cases. And then you get that person on a ventilator, and now you're getting more kickback from the government, right? And so just like how that one guy, the mayor in Tennessee, had died after hospitalization, you know, and the majority, 8 out of 10 or more people, like that, I think it's close to 8 out of 10 people that end up on a ventilator, period, end up dead. statistically. And then if you have so-called COVID, then your chances are even worse. So don't quote me on that. That's just kind of rough numbers of what I think I've heard. So yeah, this number needs to be divided by 10 first. So we need to get this number out of here. Bring it up here. Divide it by 10 because 10% of the world's population, right? Or we need to get 10% of this. So we need to not divide it by 10. We need to say, or I'll even go all the way back over here and say 0.10, which is another way to say 10%. 10% of, and that's multiplication. That's like the little x, right? 10%, that's what that really is. I'm used to doing computer kind of math figures. So that's 0.10 to make it clear. 0.10, there's a 0 right there on all those. Okay, so 10% of 7.8 billion, that's how we'd say that in normal human English, right? Is what? Let's do it over here so we get it right. 0.1 is the same way of saying that, times 7800123. So hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. What's 0.1? 0.1 of that equals right there, 780 million. We probably knew that without doing the math, but we just want to make sure that we do it all fancy dancy. Get all our numbers right. So I always check our math too, right? Okay, so then come over here and out of that number, copy that number, and then we'll clear this out and we'll bring that 1085151 over that number, which is 780 million now, equals, there we go, only 2 zeros in front of it, just like that, 139. So we got 0.2 zeros. Here, I'll even just copy it out of there just to make sure and get rid of that percent sign because that's not a percent yet. So that's what that equals. Okay, and then what we can do is we can round. We can pick a number of digits. So we'll go to this 9 because 9 rounds up, and then this 1 can round down without anybody crying too much about that, right? I mean, if you couldn't find a number that rounds down better than 1, so we'll get rid of that. And 9 rounds up, so this would become like a 0.4, right? It was a 39. Let's leave that there for full disclosure. 0.00140, like that, just to be fair. You know what I mean? Tomorrow it will be closer to that. So now to do the percentage, we got to multiply this times 100, times 100. Just like up here, because if you multiply that 0.64 times 100, like we had here, and that equals plain old 64, and that's how you get that percent sign, that plain old 64, right? So we want to be able to put a percent sign next to this figure. So in order to do that, we have to say 0.0014 times 100, which is just going to move that decimal place over 2 points. So that equals 0.14. And now we can put the percent sign next to it. So a little over 1/10 of 1% of all those cases of people, including auto accidents and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and even probably a lot of presumed cases, I would have to imagine. That's the case fatality rate. That's the CFR. So, I mean, they were basically telling us if we could get it down to like 1.4%, that would be good, right? Like, if we could get it down to 1% or under 1%, we're like 10 times lower than the value that they wanted to flatten the curve to ideally. We're 10 times lower than that. And we have mass mandates across most of the country. by expired power grabbing governors. And now it's to the point where it's causing people to lose their jobs over it. People are losing employment because their employers are listening to these governors and stuff like that. You know what I mean? To where people who don't want to wear these masks are now 99% of people or more who don't want to wear a mask are unemployed now. They have no choice but to be unemployed. Isn't that ridiculous? You know what I mean? Or maybe, that small percentage of them that choose not to can also go work outdoors, and we're right now in the middle of fall going into towards winter. So I don't know a whole lot of places in the United States besides the very southern portion of it that are very desirable to work outdoors in the winter. So that's where we're at. That's that number. So just think if they, that means that out of that to get, like, if we take that number and multiply it times 1,000. So what's that of 1,000? That's 140. No, that couldn't be 140 people out of 1,000. That's the wrong way to do that math. I'm not going to try and get it. That there's no way that's 140 people out of 1,000. Let me put it that way. That's not the right way to do that math, because 140 people out of 1,000 would be 140 out of 1,000. So that'd be like 140 over 1,000, which is not what gives you that number. So to find 14%, oh, that's 14%. So now if I want to do the math, I need to go like the 0.0014 of 1,000 equals, so that's 1.5 people. We'll round that up to 5. 1.5 people out of every 1,000 people that actually get it, supposedly contract it, will die. So that means 1.5 people, and that means you're gotta probably factor in some auto accidents in there. So if you get COVID, you might die in an auto accident. That's even, you have a 1.5 people out of every 1,000 people that get COVID could die in some way. Could die in some way where they will find out that that person had COVID and report it as a COVID fatality. That's what that number's saying. So really, you could probably, if you're coming from where I'm coming from, you could probably knock that 4 off then and just say 1 in 1,000. You know what I mean? Like, get rid of that half value and say, okay, well, if the numbers probably sound like they're inflated from all directions in most cases, not every case, but in a lot of, I don't mean in most cases like in most individual reported number cases, but in most like states or something, like I would say that probably most states are inflating their numbers, or at least the prominent states are, like California, New York, and stuff like that. I feel they are. I know that Texas is for sure. Texas has policies to do that have been blown, on the news stations and stuff like that. And I don't just mean news reporters saying it. I mean, there's actual footage of the court proceedings and stuff that are saying that people need to start report. I guess they wouldn't be court proceedings. What is it? It looks like a courtroom. It's like a county hearings or whatever. Like, all my vocabulary today is just shot, but it's it's like the assemblies. I didn't see it in a statewide assembly thing. I saw it in one of the county assemblies. But anyway, it's all over if you look around, that they're doing things in various areas prominently where they're saying, hey, they're even factoring in the one that I'm thinking of in particular that you may be thinking of as well, was one of the worst. That's where you get that 16x figure from, because they're inflating the numbers by 16 times for every COVID person potentially. They're saying, oh, that person came into contact with an average of this many people and this and that, and they're for every one they're counting 16 presumed cases off of that, and that's just like, whoa, are you kidding me? And that's straight from the horse's mouth. That wasn't like a news person on any particular side or a politician or anything saying that. That was me sitting there watching an hour of footage of that assembly discussing that. Okay, so that's the number. You know what I mean? That is the case fatality rate. And so that's out of all the cases, that's the percentage of them that die. So if we took that, you know, out of 10% of the world, 10% of the world, and we say, what is 0.0014? Because remember, there's like two zeros in front of that, because it just like up here. You know what I mean? So this is like 64.00%. Down here, we're dealing with 0.14%. That's how low of a percent it is, right? So that's why I'm doing this, because if we want to get rid of that percent symbol and do math again, we're back to that number right there. So that's what's in the calculator right there. And then we say that of, and that means multiply, right? Of 780 million. Or, yeah, 780 million. Equals, there we go, pretty close to that, this figure right here. Of course, we rounded it up right here, so the number's a little tiny bit higher than it is right there. I mean, that's still a lot of people. I'm not trying to like belittle human lives. You know, every single person's life matters, and it's sad when we lose people. Don't get me wrong on that level. But I'm just, you know, these are the cold hard facts right here. And so that number's that when we round it up. So if we really wanted to like try and be like really close to today's numbers, right? We're going to clear that out and say, what is that percent of 10% of the world's population? And then we're back really close to this number. And of course, the reason it's slightly lower is because I chopped off all those digits over here. So that's why it's slightly lower than it was there. So that's why I went ahead and rounded it up, because I was chopping off digits. So it's like, okay, now let's round it up so that we're not like skewing the numbers in a direction that's convenient for our argument, you know, that type of a thing. So anyway, that we're still right about there, you know, right at that 0.14%. And this is what everything's going off of. You know, this, look at these numbers right here, worldometers. And I've checked this on there's several, a handful of these sites, and they're all going by the same daily reported numbers and stuff. Like what's this one? 1085,372, right? If I come over here and look it up on another site, it should be exactly the same. Like COVID worldwide death. Oop, spelled death wrong. So that's the Worldometer site we've already been to. Then here's the WHO's site. They have a dashboard. So we'll go straight there. World Health Organization dashboard. And these people are just downloading like these same CSV files, I have to imagine, and using them and everything. So they're saying 1074,817. I wonder if this site's maybe factoring in have died so far as of October 13th. October 13th, Greenwich Mean Time. So that's more of like right here, UTC-ish time. Right, what time are they? They're 2:46, 4:29 a.m. There. Okay. Then if we come over here, this many deaths. So this is probably, I don't know, I'm trying to make excuses for them of why their number's slightly different. It's not huge different, but it must be a little bit older of a number. Come on, you slow web pages. How long have you had to load and you're just taking forever? And this is one thing why I think they like the lower confirmed case number too, because if they want to get the CFR off of this number, then they could go, well, let's do this one first. Copy that one, Oh, where'd the calculator go? Calculator, and then we do paste in here, and then put that over this one. Like that, and then get the answer. And then we'd slide that over 2 spots to get the percentage, so it'd be 2.8%. Or we'd round that up to 2.9, right? So that would be 2.9%. So that's one way you've probably heard there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics, which are worse than lies and damn lies, right? And that's why, because you can take statistics and just manipulate them so many ways to where it's like the lower number of confirmed cases they have and the higher number of presumed deaths, you could say, then that closes these numbers in together, you know? So if you only tested people who died for COVID, then you could say 100% of the people with COVID died. You know what I mean? Because it would be this number over this number, which would equal 1.00, and then we, you know what I mean? We slide that decimal over 2 places, multiplying it by 100 to get a percentage, and that would be 100%. So that's how statistics can get manipulated. So initially, that's what they were doing when they're like, we don't have any tests. We don't have any tests. And it's like, oh, you're running around acting like you need more tests to get the government to invest billions of dollars, so you end up with too many tests. But then that way you could say, oh, the morbidity rate is 5%. 5 out of 100. That's 1 in 20 people who get COVID will die of it. You know, and it's like, oh, well, I thought you guys didn't have any tests. So then they got tests, and all of a sudden they're now, you know, that was over the summer, right? And so now they instantly switched to talking about cases. All of a sudden it wasn't like, oh, 5%, the morbidity rate, the flattening the curve and all that. It's infections are on the rise. This state, Florida, blah, 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 more cases. You know, it was just turned into all stuff like that. And it's like, are you freaking kidding me? Of course there's more cases. You're testing like crazy. And then Trump comes on TV, President Trump comes on TV and says, hey, you guys chill out with the testing if you're going to be freaking out on the numbers. You know, of course the infection rate's going to go up. You know what I mean? That's like testing people if they can hear or not or something. You know, like all of a sudden you start whistling, and if people tell them to hold up a finger if they can hear you whistling and stuff, it's like, oh my god, ever since we just started testing people if they can hear us whistling, they're all holding up fingers saying they can. And it's just, of course they are. You know what I mean? So that's about how stupid it is. When people compare it to, like, you know, they say like, oh, well, we have 500,000 cancer deaths and 500,000 heart disease related deaths every year, and we don't shut down the country over that. That is a kind of a ridiculous argument on one hand, because it's you know, obviously there's not a lot of hard evidence to show that cancer's airborne from person to person, nor heart disease. So that is a completely idiotic argument, and I don't like to hear people say those kind of things, because then it just pees on the case of what, you know, the real truth, which is these manipulations of statistics and stuff like that. I'm not saying anything, like right here, they don't seem to be spitting out an immediate 2.8 or 2.9% right out of the gate right there, so I'm not necessarily trying to accuse them of that, but if you came down here and if that was the case, then that would be the case. Whatever. I've seen WHO spokespeople come out and say things one way one day and then come back, it's like, oh, that's something that agrees with like what the conservative voices, or agrees with the fact that this pandemic isn't as big of a deal, and then they'll come right back out the next day and say, oh, we retract that statement, or we didn't mean it like that and stuff. And it's like, and then I've gone back and played the statement before, you know, replayed it for myself so I could see, like, wait, did I hear it wrong? You know, was I just like biased in the way I was hearing it? And it's like, no, they several times throughout that interview they said these things and like were very adamant about them. That was like, out of the whole thing they were talking about for those few minutes, those were the parts that they were most adamant about. And now they're like, oh wait, gotta pump the brakes and backpedal on that now because like what were we thinking? You know, It never fails with these groups. Because the fact is a lot of them aren't even backed by like real freaking medical evidence, you know? Not that there's not tons of health data getting pumped into this system that a lot of these groups use, like CDC, World Health Organization, but it's data. It's like this. It's just numbers. And you can, how I've shown, you can manipulate those numbers different ways. You know what I mean? When I did it against the world population, according to what they're saying, then it says, hey, there's nothing to worry about here. This is less than a seasonal flu in most cases. And then when, you know, or about equal to roughly a seasonal flu of deaths. And it's like, how many of those people, how much of that 0.14% are above 65? You know what I mean? At least 80%. And I think that's a low figure. So when you crunch that in, it's like, what is most of the population? What is the factors against them? You know what I mean? That like, it's crazy. But I don't know. I think I might be out of like ranting. I think I might have ranted out here. David Knight, watch his show. He's been covering, I don't know who this guy is, but must be somebody who fills in for him occasionally. But this guy has been on top of stuff lately. And I think he's considers himself a libertarian. And so he's not necessarily pro-Trump. You know what I mean? Which somebody, and even Alex Jones isn't necessarily pro-Trump, but Alex Jones is a God and guns guy, for sure. You know, so he's going to definitely be trying to stretch things that way, you know? And all these people, I mean, we all have our biases, so I'm not trying to say this guy's not biased, but if you want, I mean, he just definitely covers stuff, and he gives credit where it's due, I feel like, most times on a lot of stuff. So even lately, he's been saying, for somebody who's been harping on Trump, especially the last few weeks, he's been really calling Trump out on a lot of stuff and saying, hey, you need to quit pandering for the election, you know, which of course, I know on one hand, it's like, well, you almost want somebody to pander so they'll win the election, because when people get too real in politics, then they disappear from the election scene and they don't, you know, they don't take office or keep office or whatever. So there's that element, and I've known that. We've all known that from day one, you know, that like, oh, if Trump was to totally just call bullshit on the whole COVID thing and everything, then they would go full force to remove him. You know what I mean? He wouldn't have any support of any major corporations. He wouldn't have any political support. He'd have zero media support. And look, he's already got a very little support in any of those industries anyway, right? So the thing is that it's like, well, you know that if there's somebody sitting in that White House, they're going to be signing through bullshit. Period. Whoever they are ever in the world, period. The last president that I remember that stopped doing that got a bullet in his head. That was Kennedy. You know what I mean? He called bullshit on all the bullshit on every one of those groups, all the 3-letter groups, the dark organizations, all that stuff. He shined light on all of it and said he's not putting up with that crap anymore, and he started working to get the dollar back to be not just a fiat currency, but actually get silver backing the dollar and pull the power away from the Federal Reserve and all that. And you saw the whole world has seen what happened to him. He got offed. And he called bullshit on so many groups and organizations that you can't put your finger on which one did it to him. It was probably all of them. You know? So it's like, it's cool on one hand that he wanted to he wanted to be a people's president that much. And he was. So anyway, that's just to say those kind of people don't survive. And then you go back to somebody like Lincoln, a very similar story, you know. And the crazy part is there's, even though Trump might seem pretty boastful about it, there are a lot of parallels between him and Lincoln. And especially if you get down to how close to a civil war, you know. I would like to say that I don't think we'll end up in a civil war, but it's too close for comfort, for sure, on that topic. And you know, Abraham Lincoln was a president during a civil war and stuff like that. So, and that's just one comparison right there. There's a lot. If you want to get technical about what's going on about how they rose to power, like all sorts of stuff. And Trump even swore in on Lincoln's Bible, supposedly. I don't think it was the same Bible that Lincoln swore in on himself, but it was a Bible that he later had. But anyway, I guess I'm gonna sign out because I'm out of stuff to rant about for now, and I think I've been talking for like 10 zillion seconds. So there it is. There's that case fatality rate right there. This number 0.14%. A little over 1 out of 1,000 people with quote unquote COVID-19 will die in an automobile accident or at a hospital. My grandpa got he got a yeast infection in his eyeballs from being at a hospital. I couldn't believe it. I'd never heard of somebody getting a yeast infection in their eyeballs. And you know where we usually hear about yeast infections taking place. So imagine that environment on the eyeballs. And dude didn't go to the hospital over anything related to that. They tried to pump him full of antibiotics ridiculously, and that wiped out the biotics. Antibiotics don't pick good and bad. They take it all. They get rid of all your biotics, good and bad. And so you keep pumping somebody full of antibiotics, pretty soon they don't have any defense system. And, he was in his 80s at that time, and they did that to him, and it was like, are you kidding me? So he got a yeast infection in his freaking eyeballs. And he was so bad from that, like the way the hospital was treating him, we had to wear cough masks back then just to go in the room to see him. And, that was a guy with multiple good health insurances and stuff. And that's what's terrifying, is to see the way that my grandparents that had multiple good health insurances were treated in their later days. And then it's like, whoa, there's no way this Obamacare or any of this kind of state junk is going to be any better than any of that was. And oh man, it's crazy. You got to give a mile to get an inch when it comes to healthcare. It's crazy. But yeah, this is what the New World Order is taking over with this number right here. And they haven't even unleashed Ebola or any of that on the populations. If you look at what's going down right now, they're doing all of this with as little as possible. They're trying to take as much power grabs with as little, you know what I mean? They're like the big bullies that are like, they're going to just look at you and clench their fist and grit their teeth at you. They're not going to come over and beat you up just yet. They're going to do that and see how much your knees will start shaking and if you'll submit. Because like I said, people are losing jobs. We all know this. It's not just the economy's wrecked. Now you can't go back to work unless you put on that fucking mask. You know what I mean? And what's next? Everybody submits to that fucking mask. Next thing's a needle in your damn arm. You know what I mean? Over vaccinations that show me the safety and efficacy of vaccines. Because it ain't there. I've looked at it myself. It's not there. The safety and efficacy of vaccines has never been established. So many people are surprised. That argument is always, there's no argument when it comes to global warming and safety and efficacy of vaccines. And those are the two biggest conversations, the two biggest debates that need to be had right there. But they're instantly shut down most times. Thanks for listening.